I know a lot of really smart people who know a ton about business, who have big degrees. A lot of times they're like CPAs. They might be very knowledgeable about business, and yet they never actually go in and start. I want to talk to entrepreneurs and people who are thinking of starting a business. What does it actually take to start and grow and build a real business? I want to make this because I keep finding all these folks that want to start businesses and they get all this terrible advice. There's so much opportunity for them to actually get it done. And I want to talk about what that is. It's really all about finding people who have a problem and providing a solution to that problem. And in a way, you're kind of like, in McDonald's, you have to get people to actually buy a hamburger from you. And then you have to actually make and have a good operating, not only the hamburger, but the process of getting the hamburger needs to be done. You have to have people there. You have to have sales and execution. You have to find people that have the problem, and then you actually have to solve that problem. And if you're an accounting firm, you need to find business owners that need their taxes done. They have ugly books, and you're going to present a better future for them. If you're doing concrete patios, by golly, you have to intersect with new homeowners that want to put a concrete patio out there. You need to show them the options and have them, and then actually build them good patios. And so what I want to talk about here is there's an analogy. Entrepreneurship to me it's almost like being a fishing guide or a fisherman. And here's a little story. When I was growing up, so I'm 40 years old now, and the year's 2022. And when I was growing up, I grew up in the suburbs of Minneapolis here, and we had a little lake called Man-Made Lake. And it was basically an old gravel pit from the 70s that had been filled in. And it was just this rinky-dink little pond, and I loved fishing. I had a buddy who said, hey man, if we go out there, and we can catch a bunch of fish. And we'd go out to this little pond. I'd get my little bike, this BMX bike that I had, or this really corny looking Murray mountain bike. And I'd put the red wagon behind me with a black handle. I'd tie it on with a rope and I'd pull it behind my bike. I'd throw my tackle box. We'd go out down the road here in our backyards, and I'd go to my buddy's house and we would dig up worms. And we didn't go buy anything. We dug our own worms. We'd bring the worms with us. And then I had some tackle and it never really worked. We'd ride our bikes about 1.5 miles down the road to Man-Made Lake, which is now Valley Park Lake. And we would go there, and there was this one spot next to a culvert where if you put a hook and a bobber, you would catch sunfish immediately. And growing up, only sunfish. Like maybe every once in a while a bullhead, but we never had the experience of having real Minnesota fishing. If you know anything about lake fishing here in the Twin Cities or in Minneapolis or Minnesota or up north or anything, it's walleyes and northerns and big crappie and all this. We never knew any of that. All we caught was sunfish. Well, one day I get invited to go to my uncle's. He had a lake. And I remember me and my cousin Trevor, we jumped in this little paddle boat. We go off and we saw these guys in a boat, and all of a sudden we look up and these guys are pulling in northerns, and they're like being a grown up now and doing a little bit of fish, they're not very big northerns, right? But to us, they were monsters. I was like, oh my gosh, I want to catch that. So I was like, okay, I got glasses now. If you didn't notice, I turned 40. I'm old now. I can't see straight. And I'm watching these guys, and they're using a jig with a spoon on it, right? And they're reeling it in, and oh, that's really cool. I have one of those. I've never used one. I'll get it. The guys disappeared as I was tying it up. And so I tie up my little spinner bait. And I'm like, oh, I don't know how to do this. Like, all right, let's try it. And I throw it in once and I get a bunch of weeds. I'm like, oh, shoot, weeds. I don't want that. So I put a bobber on this stupid thing. So I throw a bobber out there and this spoon is sitting on the bottom. Nothing happens. I didn't catch a northern that whole time until all of a sudden I just caught one. I'm like, sweet. And it was game changing. It was like the biggest fish I had ever caught in my entire life. Okay. So here's what I'm talking about. Here's how this relates to business. In a way, creating an outcome for a customer or providing a solution and actually having that solution occur is kind of like catching a fish. Now, if I were to approach somebody and say, hey, can I take you fishing to go catch some northerns? And I had no experience of actually catching northerns. I didn't know how it is. If you haven't put together a nice little package, a good solution, a good outcome to people, you're never going to win. And you're never going to have very much luck. So I always recommend when people are first getting started, find a way to just get some repetitions and get started by catching some fish. And that usually means starting to connect and find people who have that problem. Because ultimately, when you're in sales, you're in entrepreneurship or business ownership, you're finding people who are stuck in a problem, and you're going to provide a better future moving forward that the outcome is fantastic for them. So you're finding people that are stuck here and you're helping them get there. And not only are you helping them get there, but you're going to make that process fantastic. But ultimately, you're kind of like Yoda. They are like Luke Skywalker, and they don't know how to use the Force, and you're going to show them how you can make their life better. Well, in order to do that, you're going to have to go find people that have that problem. And in the beginning, you should probably be candid about the level of competency, experience, or whatever it is that you have in terms of providing that solution. If you're new, by golly, go out and find people with the problem and give it away for free, or do it with them, or offer to do it for cheap. Get repetitions under your belt, because when you do that, what you're going to find is as you gain more repetitions and more experience of actually doing it, suddenly you're going to have the competence inside of you, the confidence that you're competent, and you'll have the belief inside of you that you can actually do that. That you could ask your little buddy to come alongside you and come fishing with you, and by golly, there's a chance we're going to catch a northern, right? But if you would have went northern fishing with me back in the day, you would never catch anything, right? Now, there's certainly, like, when you're creating these solutions, just like fishing, you don't need a boat, but it's helpful if you have a boat. You don't need a rappel rigging and a couple reels and rods. You don't need equipment. You don't need gear, but by golly, it's a lot more helpful. And it's the same thing when it comes to your marketing, your operations, your team, your equipment, anything that goes into providing that solution. It's not that it has to be done. Like, you can go catch northerns with corn out on the corner, but you know what's a lot easier is to have Rapalas in a boat so that you can actually do it. You have a higher success rate, right? But in the beginning, what you have to do is, at its most core, go out, find people with the problem, and get repetitions of just actually helping people get that problem solved.